Hey guys, tonight we're crawling into one of the muddiest, loudest, and least Instagrammable chapters in history, the trenches of World War I. You're not touring a museum or flipping through a textbook. Nope. You're lacing up mud-caked boots, clutching a rifle you barely know how to use, and stepping into a soggy coffin dug into the side of a shell-blasted landscape. There's a strong chance you won't survive this, by the way. But hey, at least the lice are friendly. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is over there. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You step off the transport wagon boots, hitting ground that isn't really ground anymore, just churned heavy muck pretending to be soil. It swallows your ankles whole with a grotesque squish, as if the earth itself wants you to turn around. Too late. The officer barks something you don't quite catch over the distant thud of artillery. You're here now. Welcome to the Western Front. The first thing that hits you isn't the mud or the distant gunfire or even the faint moans drifting up from somewhere unseen. It's the smell. An assault on your senses, made up of unwashed bodies, rotting sandbags, old soup, and something worse, something dead. You try not to breathe too deeply. Doesn't help. A soldier shuffles past, eyes sunk in uniform, indistinguishable from the trench wall. He mutters something that might be a warning or might just be a prayer. You catch 3 words, mind the rats. That seems ominous. You're still not sure if this is a battlefield or a waiting room for something worse. The trench is more of a labyrinth than a straight line. You're told this part is called the fire trench, which is fun because it means it's the one that gets shot at the most. Behind that, there's the support trench, then the reserve trench, and maybe even a latrine somewhere in between, if you're lucky. Historians still argue whether this system was brilliantly efficient or just a glorified maze designed to confuse enemy and ally alike. Your assigned spot is a cramped section between a rusting periscope and a pile of discarded boots. There's no floor, just duckboards floating on water that hasn't drained in months. The mud sucks at your soles with every step, as if it's whispering, "Lie down. Just rest. Let go." But you don't. Not yet. A corporal with a beard the size of a raccoon hands you a tin of rations and says, "Eat while it's still daylight. Night belongs to the mortars." You nod like you understand, then spend the next 10 minutes trying to figure out how to open the tin without losing a finger. The contents. Something between meat and glue. You don't ask questions. Nobody ever does. Nearby, a soldier named Baker is scrawling something in a tiny notebook. Turns out he used to be a school teacher. He offers you a pencil stub and paper. "Write your folks," he says, "even if it's just to say your feet still work." You do. You lie, of course. Say the weather's fine, the food's decent, and your spirits are high. You fold the letter and wonder if it'll reach them before you stop breathing. The sun starts to dip, casting everything in bronze. It's almost beautiful if you squint and ignore the barbed wire haloing the horizon. A soft breeze rolls in. You think about home. Then a shell lands somewhere to the left with a crack that punches your ribs from the inside out. Welcome back to reality. You flinch. Everyone flinches, then goes back to whatever they were doing. It's strange how quickly noise becomes wallpaper. You look up. The trench walls are sandbags stacked higher than your head, some torn open to reveal the dirt beneath. Duckboards creak as soldiers shuffle by, some humming, others muttering to themselves. You wonder how many of them you'll outlast, or if it'll be the other way around. There's a wooden sign nailed to the trench wall that reads, Violet Sector, 3rd Koi. It's peeling half-burnt at the edges. Someone's drawn a cartoon face on it, and beneath that, God forgot this place. You don't disagree. You try to settle in. Not that there's anywhere soft or dry, or even remotely inviting. Your pack becomes a pillow, your rifle, your bedmate. You wedge yourself into a corner and exhale slowly. Somewhere up ahead, a machine gun coughs. Somewhere behind, a man sings off-key about a girl named Maggie. You close your eyes. That's when it hits you. This isn't going to be over in days or weeks. The war is like the mud, clinging, constant, inescapable. You're not a hero here. You're a body holding a line. And that line is drawn in sewage blood and hope you're not sure you still have. Still, there's something quietly defiant about this place. Like how someone carved a chessboard into a wooden crate and made bottle caps into pawns. Or how Baker saved a dandelion in a canteen lid because it reminded him of a field back home. Or how nobody, not one person, lets the mud steal their boots without a fight. The sky darkens. Stars blink into view, one by one, faint behind clouds of smoke and the glow of distant flares. You press your back to the wall, knees up, helmet tilted over your eyes. You're in the trench now, not visiting, not reading about it. You are it. And tomorrow, if you're lucky, you'll still be breathing long enough to complain about the breakfast stew. You wake up to a tailbone full of regret and the gnawing sense that something has crawled across your chest. You blink. It's not a dream, not a mouse, a rat fat damp and entirely indifferent to your existence. You jolt, and it scurries off tail, dragging like a string of bad luck. Baker nearby chuckles and says, "That one's George. He likes newcomers. You don't find it funny." Yet, rats are everywhere here. They breed like rumors and grow as big as small cats, feeding off the scraps of war, including, yes, the fallen. You don't like to think about that, but the older soldiers confirm it with shrugs. Efficient little buggers, one says, chewing a biscuit with the same dead-eyed calm. You suddenly lose your appetite. The trenches aren't just home to rats. There are lice, 2 million of them. Tiny white vampires that nest in your seams, your hair, your soul. You try to scratch without making it look obvious, but you give up around lunchtime and join the rest of the itching chorus. Your uniform, it turns out, is not a shield. It's more like a personal terrarium for parasites. At some point, someone shows you how to delouse. You take your shirt off, light a match, and run it along the seams. Tiny pops confirm your success, or at least partial victory. Of course, they'll be back by tomorrow. Historians still argue whether delousing was more of a ritual than an actual solution. Then there's the smell. No one talks about it because no one can escape it. It's the scent of soaked wool, gunpowder rot, and too many unwashed bodies pressed together for too long. It clings to everything. You start to believe it's become part of you. Even your dreams smell like feet. Washing is a luxury reserved for ghosts and generals. You might get a bucket of cold water once a week if supplies aren't cut. Some soldiers collect rain in their helmets, scrubbing underarms with torn rags. You don't remember what clean feels like, and your skin has started to accept that. Filth is your new layer of armor. You try to mark the days, but the hours blur together. There's light, then dark, then light again. Sometimes you hear singing, other times screaming. Sometimes you hear nothing at all, and that's somehow worse. You forget what day of the week it is, and eventually you stop caring. The trench doesn't recognize calendars. It only counts survivors. One night the lice are so bad you can't sleep. You sit against the trench wall boots in the sludge and watch the rats squabble over a crust of bread. You try to scare them off, but they barely flinch. Baker tells you that some soldiers have named the rats, even trained them to run races. One sergeant in the next unit supposedly bets rum rations on whose rat wins. You'd laugh, but you've started to believe it's true. There's a running joke among the men. If the lice don't drive you mad, the rats will. Or maybe the frogs. Yes, frogs. They come out during the rain, croaking in the mud like drunken choir boys. One soldier claimed to see a frog with a cigarette in its mouth, and no one even questioned it. When the absurd becomes daily, it stops being absurd. It just is. You learn to walk differently in the trench. More of a shuffle, really, to avoid slipping or twisting an ankle in the endless sinkholes. The mud isn't just wet. It's sticky, clingy, greedy. It devours anything dropped. Gloves, knives, pride. Once you watch a man lose a boot to the muck, he just stands there for a moment swaying and then falls straight forward like a felled tree. Nobody helps him up right away. They're too busy laughing. Later, you slip too. And no one laughs. Not because it wasn't funny, but because you fell face first into something that may or may not have once been a latrine. You rinse your mouth with cold tea and vow revenge on gravity. You become a creature of the trench. You duck instinctively at every distant whistle. You keep your rifle close, even when nature calls. You listen for changes in the sounds of shell fire because you've learned to tell the difference between outgoing and incoming rounds. That kind of knowledge wasn't in the pamphlet they gave you at training camp. At night, you talk less. Words feel heavier in the dark. Instead, you pass around a cigarette or a ration biscuit, and someone mutters a joke that lands soft and tired. You laugh anyway, because if you don't laugh, the lice might win. You dream of baths, not glory, not medals, baths, long steaming ones with bubbles and privacy, and the absence of anything that might bite you mid-soak. You'd trade half your rations for 5 minutes in a real tub. Someone once said they'd trade their soul. You believed them. There's an unspoken bond among the men. You're all hostages in the same muddy purgatory, and no one here is better than anyone else, not after the lice find you. One private from Manchester turns out to be a violinist back home. He plays on an old battered fiddle he keeps wrapped in oilcloth. He plays over the drone of war, and for a moment it sounds like peace, or at least the memory of it. You wonder sometimes if the enemy has lice too, if their rats are named, if their mud is just as cruel. A part of you hopes so, not out of malice, but because it makes this all feel a bit more fair, a bit more human. In the morning, the sun rises like it always does, slow, golden, and wholly indifferent. You scratch at your collar, flick a rat off your biscuit, and take another sip of tea that tastes like sadness. The man next to you sighs and says, "Well, another beautiful day in paradise." And for some reason, that makes you smile. The mail comes in the afternoon, not with trumpets or fanfare, but with a weary corporal dragging a sack that looks like it's fought its own battle. "Post," he mutters, and the trench stirs like something waking from hibernation. Everyone's suddenly alert, even the man with trench foot, so bad he winced while blinking. You lean forward, heart doing something suspiciously close to hope. A name is called, not yours. Another name, still not. Then, finally, a folded envelope is tossed into your lap like a bone to a starving dog. Your hands tremble as you pick it up. It's from home. You don't know what it says yet, but you already want to read it slowly to make it last. Inside, your sister writes about the cat giving birth. Under the porch, your mom worrying about the garden, your father pretending not to. They don't ask if you're scared. They don't mention gas or machine guns or your last letter's water stain that looks suspiciously like blood. They ask about the food, about your new friends. They tell you it's getting cold back home. You forget what that feels like, the cold of winter, not the dampness of a trench that seeps into bone. You don't write back right away, not because you don't want to, but because you don't know what to say. Today a man was shot through the throat while whistling. Probably not. A rat stole my soap. Maybe. In the end, you settle for something like still alive, still thinking of you. Send socks. Around you, others clutch their letters like relics. One man reads his over and over again. Another tucks his away without a glance. You find out later it was a letter telling him his brother died in a different trench. That's war for you, grief with postage. For the ones who get nothing, it's worse. They pretend not to care. Postman forgot me. Again, one says, grinning. But his knuckles are white around the butt of his rifle. And later, you hear him tearing up an old envelope just to hold the pieces. Historians still argue whether mail was a morale tool or a psychological weapon, depending on what came or didn't. There's a superstition in your unit. If you get a letter and read it right away, you'll survive the next raid. If you wait, you won't. You think that's nonsense until the lad who always saved his letters for a quiet moment doesn't come back from a night patrol. His envelope is still sealed. You carry that image for days. Sometimes the mail is more than letters. Parcels arrive crushed tins of treacle cakes that have turned into bricks, knitted socks, even chocolate if someone's mother is feeling heroic. You remember the chocolate. You split it into quarters and share it with 3 others, even though your stomach screams to hoard it. One bite tastes like everything you've forgotten. Warm kitchens, real blankets, childhood birthdays. A strange hierarchy forms around those gifts. Whoever has the most recent parcel becomes temporary royalty. The rest hover, pretending not to hope for a crumb or a whiff. Baker once got a tin of sardines and was treated like a king for 2 whole days. He still mentions it like it was a battle he won. You keep your letters tucked in your inner coat pocket near your heart, not because it's poetic, but because it's the driest place left. When it rains, and it always rains, they're the last things you try to protect. One night you wake up to find your sleeves soaked, your socks squelching, but the letter still dry. You feel absurdly victorious. Some soldiers write back obsessively, as if each word is a thread tying them to the world beyond the trench. Others stop writing entirely. One man rips up his letters before anyone can read them, says it's better not to be missed. You understand, but you don't agree. You want to be missed. You want someone to remember. You were here, even if it's just in smeared pencil and run-on sentences. Censorship is the game behind the scenes. Officers read your letters before they go out, blacking out anything that could harm morale. One lad mentioned how many men they'd lost last week, and his entire paragraph came back looking like it had been attacked by an octopus. So you learn to write around the truth. We had a busy week means you nearly died. The nights are noisy means shelling hasn't stopped in 3 days. The boys are in good spirits means someone snapped and had to be carried off screaming. Once you try being honest, just once, you write about the smell, the cold, the way the mud seems to whisper to you when you sleep. The letter never makes it out. The sergeant reads it and says, "You'll scare your poor mom half to death." He tears it in half and tells you to try again. But even filtered, the act of writing helps. It makes things real, contained. You tell yourself, if I can describe it, I can survive it. You don't know if that's true, but you keep writing anyway. Evenings become sacred. You huddle with your mates in the dugout, lighting a single candle, each taking turns reading your scraps of paper. Some pretend to read, even when their hands are empty. No one calls them out. Instead, you nod like you understand. Because you do. In those moments, the war fades just a little. The trench becomes quieter. The lice seem to stop scratching. And you imagine someone far away reading your words and worrying just enough to keep writing back. and that more than a helmet or a rifle is what keeps you alive another day. The first time you see what's for dinner, you think it's a joke. It's not. That grayish lump on your plate, that's bully beef, canned corned beef that jiggles even in the cold. The slab of beige next to it, hardtack biscuit, older than some of the recruits and probably used to build cathedrals in a past life. There is also something soupy in a tin cup, suspiciously lacking in identifiable ingredients. You sip it and instantly regret every decision that led you here. The Army calls it sustenance. You call it edible punishment. If you're lucky, there might be some carrots or turnips floating around in the sludge. If you're very lucky, they won't taste like old boots. You've heard rumors of sausages, bacon, even real eggs. But those are just stories passed around like fairy tales with the same wistful tone people use to describe unicorns. Still you eat. You always eat. Hunger trumps dignity. And after a while you stop noticing the taste or lack thereof. Your stomach becomes a loyal soldier, grateful for anything solid. The trick, you're told, is to eat quickly and never look too closely. Mystery is the best seasoning. Baker says, chewing something that might be cabbage, might be newspaper. Once the cook serves something that smells different, rich, almost inviting, you hesitate. It's a stew. You ask what's in it. The cook shrugs and says, "Don't ask, just eat." You do. It's the best meal you've had in weeks. You only find out later that it was horse meat, not from the official rations, from a horse that had fallen. You don't know whether to be horrified or grateful. Historians still argue whether such off-the-record meals were survival or scandal. Probably both. Breakfast is usually tea, or something calling itself tea. Brown liquid that tastes like boiled sock, but it's warm, and that's enough. Sometimes there's porridge if supplies haven't been disrupted. It's thick gray and clings to your spoon like it has abandonment issues. You eat it anyway. There's a black market economy among the troops operating right under the noses of the officers. A square of chocolate worth a pair of dry socks. A real egg, practically a dowry. One man trades a tin of peaches for a harmonica. Another sells his extra ration of tobacco for a half-clean shirt. You once swapped a single spoonful of jam for 5 bullets. Totally worth it. Some soldiers get parcels from home cakes wrapped in too many layers, jars of pickles, tinned puddings. One day, a lad from Liverpool gets a fruitcake so dense it survives a shell blast. He eats it anyway, like it's holy bread. You get a bite. It tastes like Christmas. You nearly cry. But most of the time it's just the basics. The Army has a genius for feeding you exactly enough to function, but never enough to feel satisfied. You learn to chew slowly, savor the texture, pretend that spoonful of beans is an appetizer to a roast dinner you'll never see. Of course, the food changes depending on where you're stationed. In drier sections of the line, rations come more regularly. Closer to no man's land, things get unpredictable. Sometimes you go without hot food for days, surviving on crackers and boiled water. One night someone finds a moldy onion buried in a supply crate. The cheer that follows is louder than any artillery. The onion is diced and added to everything for the next 3 days, even tea. Water is another issue. Clean water. A myth. Most of it tastes like rust and chemicals because it's been purified with chalky tablets. You learn not to complain. Once you catch a lad trying to strain his tea through his sock to get rid of the bits. The sock wasn't clean. You both drink it anyway. Cooking is mostly done in field kitchens, basically giant tin cauldrons over fire, manned by overworked lads who used to be bakers, plumbers, or librarians. They do their best, bless them. One bloke named Harrison makes a mean stew out of old tinned tomatoes, cabbage leaves, and sheer audacity. The officers hate it. The privates love him. You try cooking once, a sort of experiment with potatoes, dried meat, and too much pepper. You nearly set a trench board on fire and end up banned from the kitchen for life. You're not too upset. Cooking here feels like trying to write poetry during an earthquake. Then there's the smell of the food when there is food. It travels fast, floating down the line, waking stomachs and memories alike. Even the rats get excited. You once swatted one, trying to share your biscuit. He glares at you like you're the rude one. Despite it all, food becomes something sacred, not for the taste, but for what it means. You're still here, still breathing, still capable of hunger. It anchors you to normality, even when everything else feels upside down. Even bad food becomes ritual. The same tin, the same spoon, the same groan of disappointment. It's comforting in its own miserable way. Sometimes you talk about what you'll eat after the war. One man swears he'll eat nothing but steak for a year. Another says he'll open a bakery and never touch tinned food again. You dream of your mum's soup, fresh bread, butter, real butter, not that margarine paste that comes in government-issued cubes. You'd trade your boots for a proper sandwich. But dreaming about food is dangerous, makes the rations taste worse. So you learn to think small. Today, the biscuit isn't as hard as usual. That's a win. The tea was only slightly muddy. Another win. You didn't have to chase a rat off your plate. Triple win. You finish your meal, scrape the tin clean, and wipe your mouth on a sleeve that hasn't been cleaned since September. Around you, men do the same. No talking, just chewing. Everyone pretending it's enough. Because what else can you do? War doesn't care if you're hungry. And when you lie back down later, trying to ignore the cramps in your belly, you think tomorrow might bring a better stew, or a letter, or maybe just fewer lice. In this place, that's enough to keep going. You don't hear the bugle. You feel it. A metallic ripple cuts through the air, part vibration, part dread, and before you can remember where you are, someone's already nudging your boot. Stand to. 2 words, soft-spoken, heavy, with meaning. You sit up too fast, back spasming helmet, sliding sideways. Your fingers fumble for your rifle like it's an old lover you forgot how to hold. Dawn, stand to, isn't optional. It's the ritual that greets every sunrise in the trenches, because historically, the worst attacks happen at first light, when shadows are long and vision short. The enemy knows that. You know that. So before the sun even crests the broken ridges, you and your fellow mud-smeared silhouettes are shoulder-to-shoulder eyes, trained over the parapet rifles, ready. Your breath clouds the cold air. You blink against the sting in your eyes. Your trigger finger twitches not because you're ready, but because you're not. No one ever is. You hear someone yawn behind you. Another spits into the muck. No talking. Just watching, listening, waiting. The whole trench holds its breath, and then nothing. No whistles, no shots, no sudden scramble up the ladders, just fog and birdsong and the usual orchestra of squelching mud. You stay alert anyway, for 30 minutes, an hour, until an officer equally exhausted mutters, "Stand down." You lower your rifle. The tension doesn't. Sometimes you wonder if it's all just ceremony, some twisted theater of war. Historians still argue whether the ritual of stand-to was truly protective or more psychological conditioning, like brushing your teeth, so the plaque doesn't win the long game. Either way, the moment passes and the trench exhales. You sit back down on your crate or box or whatever you've claimed as seat. Your knees pop, your back throbs, your soul sighs. You reach for your tin mug, now half filled with something that used to be tea, but now resembles a puddle with ambition. Baker grumbles something about false alarms. You nod. But deep down, you're glad it wasn't real. You're not sure you'd have climbed that ladder again today, or tomorrow, or ever. The thing about stand-to is that it breaks up the day before the day even begins. It primes your body for adrenaline, then leaves you nowhere to spend it. So you slump against the trench wall, twitchy and tired. The rats don't care. They keep chewing whatever's left of last night's stew near the latrine. A few lads light up cigarettes. Smoke curls into the damp morning like pale ghosts. One offers you a drag. You take it. Not because you smoke, but because sharing something warm is better than not. You cough like a rookie. They laugh like veterans. You feel slightly more human. Breakfast comes next if you're lucky. Today it's porridge. Cold, but there's a smudge of jam on top. Possibly an accident, but you cherish it like a birthday gift. The spoon scrapes tin metal on metal. You eat fast, so your stomach doesn't realize it's disappointed. Then comes the routine. Clean your rifle. Check your ammo. Write a few lines in a notebook you're scared someone will read after you're gone. Maybe you patch a hole in your sock. Maybe you dig. There's always something to dig. The trench doesn't maintain itself. Rain collapses walls. Shells shatter supports. So you grab a shovel and pretend it's not insulting, fixing a hole in the ground that wants to kill you. You remember the first time you held that shovel? Back then, it felt like punishment. Now it's almost comforting. Shovels don't explode. They don't argue about strategy. They just move dirt. A few of the lads chat while digging. One talks about a bakery he'll open. Another wonders what girls back home look like now. Someone brings up a football match no one really watched, but everyone pretends to remember. You smile. Then you glance toward no man's land and stop, because even now, even with the sun rising and the enemy seemingly asleep, there's always that space between, that cursed strip of land where nothing grows and no one returns, unchanged. You saw a boot there once. Just a boot. No foot inside. Still, you think about it more than you should. Night is terrifying, but the quiet mornings after stand to. They're worse in some ways. They trick you into relaxing, make you believe the war might take a coffee break. That's when it usually comes back with a vengeance. Someone near the parapet sneezes, a loud echoing H-chew that might as well be a trumpet blast. Everyone freezes. Then, nothing. No return fire. You all exhale. Someone mutters, "Bless you," and a chuckle ripples down the line. You watch a beetle crawl across your sleeve. You let it stay. It's the first living thing you've seen today that isn't scared. Eventually, stand to becomes part of your internal clock, like brushing your teeth. If brushing your teeth came with the possibility of being shelled mid-rinse, it keeps you tense, keeps you sane, and keeps you in a state of semi-readiness that never fully fades. But there's one thing it does do, without fail. It reminds you you're still here, still upright, still breathing, still not one of the letters being passed back down the trench with a quiet, "He didn't make it." That's something. And when after the gear checks and the breakfast and the digging, you finally let your shoulders slump and your thoughts wander, it's always the same conclusion. You survived another stand to. You didn't win a battle. You didn't advance the line. You didn't even finish your porridge. But you stood. You waited. And you didn't blink first. Tomorrow you'll do it again. You've heard the phrase "going over the top" since day one, whispered in hushed tones, half joked about in mess lines, or barked with forced bravado during drills. But nothing prepares you for the moment it actually happens. It starts with a whistle, not the kind that signals tea break. This one comes sharp and shrill from an officer's lips, and it cuts through your rib cage like cold wind through wet clothes. One sharp peep, then another. It means climb. Now. You glance up at the trench wall, at the narrow wooden ladders, leaning against the sandbags like they've been waiting their whole lives to betray you. You're not sure if your legs are trembling from fear or cold, but they're definitely trembling. Someone nudges you forward. Someone behind you whispers something. You don't catch it. You can barely hear your own breath over the sudden orchestra of pounding boots, the click-clack of bolts locking into place, and that cursed whistle still ringing in your skull. And then you're climbing. Your hands grip the wooden rungs, slick with mud and something darker. You hoist yourself upward, heart punching your ribs, breath shallow. You rise until your head breaks the line of the trench wall, and suddenly you're outside. Out in it. No man's land. The air feels different up here. Wider. Raw. You're exposed now. No sandbags. No walls. Just open sky and shattered trees and dirt that looks like it's been chewed up and spit out by a god with bad manners. You break into a run, or something like a run. It's more of a lurch, really knees high, feet heavy, trying to stay upright while the ground bucks beneath you. Craters yawn open like traps. Barbed wire sprawls across the mud like drunken scribbles. Someone shouts, but it gets swallowed in the roar of artillery, the crack of rifle fire, the hiss of incoming shells. You keep moving, not because you're brave, but because stopping feels worse. Bullets whip past like angry bees. Dirt explodes inches from your boots. You hear someone cry out and collapse nearby, but you don't look back. You can't. You focus on the horizon on a splintered post that someone once called the landmark, even though it's barely taller than your knee. Time melts. You have no idea how long you've been running. 30 seconds. 3 minutes. A lifetime. You think of everything and nothing. You think about your sister's handwriting, about jam on toast, about the sound of rain when you're warm and dry. You drop to the ground when the next shell screams overhead. You land hard, face first in the mud, cheek pressed against something that might be bone, might be a tree root. You don't want to know. Someone else lands beside you, gasping, swearing. It's Baker. You recognize his voice before you see his face. He grins like an idiot. You want to punch him and hug him at the same time. Neither of you move for a second. You just lie there breathing faces in the dirt because that's the only safety left. Eventually, you crawl forward inch by inch, like a worm dodging rain. Your uniform's soaked, your knees are bruised, your rifle is mud-caked and jammed, but you clutch it like a teddy bear. Above you, flares go up casting everything in stark white flashes that make the world feel like a broken dream. Somewhere, someone's yelling orders. Someone else is screaming. You hear the distinct thud of a body hitting the ground nearby. You don't turn. You keep crawling. This is what Over the Top really is, not a heroic charge, but a clumsy, chaotic scramble through filth and fear. Historians still argue whether these frontal assaults ever made sense strategically, or whether they were simply exercises in mass sacrifice. You stop caring about the debate once you've crawled past 3 helmets with no heads under them. Eventually, you reach the edge of a shell hole. You roll in body scraping against rock and mud and huddle beside a man with wild eyes and a gash across his cheek. He nods once. You nod back. No names, no words, just breath and blood and the unspoken agreement that this hole is now your world. You sit there, pressed against the curve of the crater for what feels like hours. Occasionally, someone yells to move up. Occasionally, someone does. You stay put. You've learned the hard way that movement invites attention, and attention here is rarely a good thing. Later, when the whistles sound again, short, sharp, and final, it means retreat. It means back into the trench if you're still breathing. You wait a beat, then another, Then you start moving. You half run, half fall, back across the mud, your boots slipping your shoulders, aching. You dodge a burst of machine gun fire by sheer luck. You trip over something soft that shouldn't be soft. You keep going. When you finally slide back into the trench, like a man falling into his own grave, your body collapses against the wall. You're panting, shaking, filthy, but you're alive. And then, because war has no respect for pacing, someone hands you a rag and says, "Clean your rifle." No debrief, no congratulations, no medals, just mud and silence. You nod. You clean. Later, as you sip tea and try not to remember the taste of blood, someone says, "We gained 20 meters, 20 meters. You want to laugh or cry or punch something, but you just nod again because you're too tired for anything else. That's how it works. You go over the top. You pray. You crawl. You survive, if you're lucky. And the next time that whistle blows, you'll climb the ladder again. Not because you want to, but because that's the war. The art hanging in government buildings and history textbooks often shows men charging heroically into battle bayonets glinting in the sun, flags waving gallantly behind them. In those paintings, the soldiers all have straight backs, firm jaws, and just the right amount of mud smeared on their cheekbones to make them look rugged, not ruined. You don't look like that. When you go over the top, it's not gallantry, it's gravity, chaos, and bad coordination. You trip in the first 10 feet, land in cold muck, and scramble back up, while someone yells for you to keep bloody moving. You do. Because if you don't, someone might see. Or worse, you might die crouched like a frightened rabbit. Charging the enemy is less about tactics and more about sheer momentum. You run because you're told to, because the man beside you is running, because stopping feels like surrender. But no one tells you what to do once you get halfway across the field and realize your boots are filling with water, your rifle's jammed, and you've lost your hat. Somewhere around crater number 3. The terrain is your real enemy. The barbed wire, coiled, rusted, devilishly. Placed, doesn't care if you're from Manchester or Marseille. It wraps around your ankle, bites through your gloves, and drags you down like some feral vine. You've seen more soldiers taken out by bad footing and wire than bullets. Historians still argue whether more casualties came from direct combat or the battlefield's own cruel geography. You'd place your bet on mud once you watch a lad named Collins charge bravely through the first stretch of wire, only to vanish chest deep into a waterlogged shell hole. He disappears so fast that none of you even have time to yell. 1 second he's there, the next, he's part of the earth again. You don't talk about it. What would you say? Bayonets sound good in theory. Sharp, terrifying, heroic. In practice, they're unwieldy, awkward, and mostly useless unless you're already close enough to see the whites of someone's terrified eyes. You stab at dummies in training. Out here, you mostly carry it like a totem proof that you could be dangerous if needed, but you're much more likely to shoot club or throw your rifle, and run. One day you actually reach the enemy trench. You make it, somehow. And for a moment, just a moment, it's silent. Like time paused to admire your accomplishment. You leap in boots, crashing onto enemy planks. You expect gunfire, screams, some movie-like standoff, but it's mostly empty. A few crumpled shapes, a smoldering kettle, the lingering scent of garlic and tobacco. That's when the reality hits you. They evacuated. Left hours ago. You're fighting ghosts and echoes. A shell lands behind you. You dive. Splinters fly. Baker loses part of his sleeve and none of his sarcasm. Lovely view, he mutters, ducking beside you. Think they rent this place out for honeymoons. You snort. Laughter is your only rebellion. The myth of the gallant charge cracks under its own absurdity. You take cover in a dugout rifle aimed at the doorway. But nothing comes, just the distant sound of boots retreating, of other lads, yelling, "Hold and pull back." You look around. There's a photograph on the dugout wall, an enemy soldier's wife, maybe. She's smiling. You turn it face down. There's nothing here for you, no victory, no flag to plant, just another stretch of misery, shaped like progress. Eventually, you retreat. Crawl back across the same scarred field this time, even slower. Your legs shake. Your lungs burn. You drag someone behind you, a lad named Lewis, who caught a chunk of shrapnel in the thigh. He groans with every bump. You try not to drop him. Back in your trench, they count heads. One officer looks pale. Another just nods grimly and scribbles into a ledger. You wonder if you're a tally mark or a name. You collapse beside Baker, hands shaking, teeth chattering. He hands you a flask. It's rum, sharp and warm. For a second, you're back home stealing from your uncle's cupboard on Christmas Eve. Someone nearby starts cleaning their bayonet, though it never touched a soul. Another lad sits perfectly still, eyes wide, fingers twitching. The myth of the gallant charge is mostly that a myth. There's no glory, no cinematic climax, just mud fear and the sound of your own heartbeat trying to claw its way out of your chest. And if you're lucky, you make it back with all your parts and none of your friends missing. Sometimes you ask yourself, why do we keep doing it? Why go over the top if it never leads anywhere? The answers vary. Orders says one. Discipline says another. Because they're watching mutters, a third pointing toward the senior officers far behind the line. You never really believe any of them, but you still climb the ladder, still run, still fall. Because out here, you don't have to believe in the charge. You just have to survive it. The fog rolls in like a slow breath from something ancient and indifferent. You're lying face down in mud again, your ribs sore from hitting the ground too hard, your helmet tilted just enough to collect a teaspoon of filthy rainwater. You don't move. Not yet. Because you know what's coming next. A whistle. A shout. Then the charge. Except this time, it isn't your side doing the charging. They're coming. You hear them before you see them. Boots sloshing metal, clinking, someone screaming words you don't understand. You raise your rifle, but your fingers are shaking, not from cold this time, but from sheer, stupid fear. The kind that grabs your spine and yanks. You've seen the paintings, enemies leaping out of their trenches like vengeful gods, bayonets gleaming, uniforms pristine. But when you finally see them, they look just like you, mud-covered, wide-eyed, staggering forward through chaos. You fire. You don't know if you hit anything. You never do. Most shooting in these moments is pure guesswork, aimed at smoke and noise. You could be hitting dirt. You could be hitting sky. You could be hitting a man named Franz, whose favorite color was green and who played accordion back home. Historians still argue how much of trench combat was deliberate action versus blind reaction. You don't care. You pull the trigger again. A shell explodes to your left, throwing you sideways, ears ringing, face burning. The world turns white, then black, then brown. Someone's shouting your name, or maybe cursing. You open your eyes to a sky that's decided it's tired of holding itself up. Baker appears above you, smeared in soot, and shouting, but it's all muffled. You nod, or think you do. He drags you by your coat, hauls you like a sack of potatoes behind a stack of sandbags that weren't there 5 minutes ago. You taste blood in your mouth and wonder if it's yours. The charge slows. Screams fade. It didn't last long, 30 seconds, a minute. But it stretches like chewing gum in your memory. Most charges don't go on for long. The machine guns see to that. You peek over the edge. No man's land is dotted with movement, some rising, most not. You see a figure crawling, enemy or friend. Who knows? You don't shoot, not because you're noble, but because you're tired. Afterward, the trench is too quiet. You'd expect cheering, relief, but no one smiles. No one even really speaks. A few men check their rifles. One sits down, eyes vacant. Another pulls out a flask and drinks deep, without offering. You don't blame him. You start to feel the shaking in your hands again. You try to grip your rifle tighter, but it doesn't help. It's not cold. It's something deeper, like your bones are protesting what just happened. Later, someone jokes, "Well, that was a fun dance." You laugh too loud. You don't mean to. It just bursts out of you, like steam from a broken pipe. You check your boots. One is ripped at the toe. Great. Mud seeps in instantly. You don't even care. At least you still have feet. Someone gathers the wounded. A corporal calls out names. Some get answers. Some don't. A medic walks by holding a bloodied rag like it's a newborn. He's crying, but no one points it out. You spot a helmet, lodged in the mud upright like someone set it there on purpose. There's no body beneath it. You wonder whose it was. You wonder who it is now. Eventually the enemy stops. They pull back, vanish into smoke, maybe regrouping, maybe retreating. You don't pursue. That's not your job. Your job is to stay here, to hold the line, to reload your weapon and pretend you're ready again. You climb out of the huddle and walk a few feet stiff-legged, like your limbs forgot how joints work. You see Baker crouched over someone, speaking gently. You don't ask who it is. You know better by now. You notice something strange, a red scarf, bright against the grays and browns. One of the lads must have been wearing it under his coat. It's still tied neatly around what's left of his neck. Somehow that scarf feels more obscene than the blood. You sit down. Try to drink. The tea is cold again. You sip it anyway. Later, someone draws the day's tally in chalk on a board near the dugout entrance. A small, crude line of stick figures, 5 down, 3 wounded. You stare at it like it's a math equation you forgot how to solve. And then, absurdly, it's time for chores. Digging, cleaning, organizing supplies. There's something oddly comforting about sweeping mud off a plank walkway that leads nowhere. You hold a broom and think this is ridiculous. But you sweep. You remember being told that the gallant charge was an act of courage, a noble advance into enemy lines. What you experienced felt more like being shoved into a meat grinder, praying your number doesn't come up. There are stories, of course. The one about the man who ran 20 meters through open fire, picked up a wounded soldier, and dragged him back. Or the lad who bayoneted 3 men in under 10 seconds and didn't get a scratch. You hear those in the quiet hours passed from lip to lip like folk songs. But you know most charges end the same way in silence. You go to sleep with your boots on your uniform damp and your hands stained with something you try not to name. You made it through another charge, barely. Tomorrow it might be your turn again, but not tonight. Tonight you dream of red scarves and falling skies. Gas is different. You can prepare for bullets. You can see shells coming. You can feel the tremble of earth just before an explosion. But gas arrives like a ghost with an agenda, creeping, curling, swallowing. And by the time someone shouts, it's already here. It starts as a whisper. Someone at the far end of the trench yells gas, and the word ripples through the line like panic on fire. You don't think. You just reach for your mask because that's what they drilled into you 1,000 times. Sleep with it. Eat with it. Bathe with it, if you're ever lucky enough to bathe. Because 1 second of hesitation is the difference between coughing and not breathing. You fumble with the straps. The mask smells like rubber and fear. The lenses fog, instantly turning the trench into a blurred nightmare. You pull it tight over your face, chest heaving, as your breath echoes inside the mask, louder, faster, like you're trapped inside your own skull. Then the gas arrives. A greenish haze drifts over the parapet, rolling low like a predator that knows it has time. The trench fills with it, silent but lethal. Your eyes sting. Even through the mask, you can taste it bitter, metallic, like licking old coins. Historians still argue about the psychological effect of gas versus its actual casualty rate. You don't care about the stats. All you know is that it makes grown men weep like children. The mask works, sort of. You can breathe, but every inhale feels like sipping air through wet cloth. Around you, muffled coughing, shouting the occasional whimper. One man rips off his mask and immediately drops to his knees, retching. Another bangs his head against the trench wall, trying to clear his vision. You sit tight, eyes wide behind glass. The fog gets thicker. Time stretches. Minutes feel like hours. And then, wind. A breeze picks up faint. At first, then stronger. It pushes the gas back, dissipates it slowly. You wait, just in case. Then someone removes their mask and inhales cautiously. No gagging, no collapse. Others follow. You do too. The first breath of unfiltered air hits like cold water. You blink, rub your face, swallow. Still here, still alive. The trench is a mess. Some men are bent over, coughing until they spit blood. Others sit slumped, masks dangling from their necks, faces gray. A few are already being dragged away, eyes blank. One medic mutters, phosgene, maybe chlorine. You don't ask what the difference is. You don't want to know. Gas leaves more than just scars on the lungs. It haunts. You dream of it curling around your boots, creeping into your tent, slipping under your helmet like a whisper. You start checking the wind without thinking. You sniff the air before every breath. Every foggy morning feels like a warning. One night, Baker jokes, at least it's not mustard gas. That stuff hurts. You laugh, because what else can you do? Then, 2 days later, you find out he wasn't joking. You see it firsthand. Skin blistered, eyes swollen shut, a man screaming until his voice gives out. It's not war. It's cruelty, dressed in chemistry. Still, gas becomes part of the background like mud or lice or the sound of distant shelling. You learn to live with it. You learn to almost laugh about it. There's this one time, this ridiculous, cursed, unforgettable time when the wind shifted too fast. The Germans released gas, but the breeze betrayed them. It drifted back into their own lines. The whole trench watches in stunned silence as clouds of poison sneak back over the barbed wire and vanish into enemy territory. Someone says, "Did we just win?" And the laughter that follows is unhinged, hysterical. You laugh until you can't breathe, until your sides ache, until your brain says, "Stop, this isn't funny," and your mouth keeps going anyway. That's the madness of it. You laugh because it's the only way to survive. Because crying would make your mask leak. Because if you don't laugh, the gas wins again. After the attack, a few lads scrawl warnings in chalk on trench walls. Gas hates you. Sniff slowly. Trust the wind. Die tired. One draws a smiley face on his mask, names it Mabel, and talks to it like a pet. Another starts sleeping with his mask on just in case. No one blinks. That's just what the war does. Gas drills become Routine, you practice putting your mask on in under 10 seconds. You sleep with it next to your face. Sometimes you wake up to your hand already reaching for it like your body knows something your brain doesn't. There's even talk of new inventions. Masks for horses, for dogs, even for pigeons. A bloke named Thompson swears he saw a pigeon wearing one, once flapping around like a tiny airborne knight. You don't believe him. Not really. But it's a good image. You hold on to it. Sometimes when there's no gas for days, you start to relax. Bad idea. That's when it hits the hardest. When your boots are finally dry, when your stomach's finally full, when someone says, "Haven't had gas in a while," that's when the ghost comes back. But still you carry on. You clean your mask. You tie it to your belt. You whistle when you walk, even if it's off key. Because the gas might take your lungs, but you refuse to let it take your spirit. And when it does come again, and it always comes again, you'll strap on that ugly rubbery thing, breathe like a man drowning, and wait for the breeze. Because sometimes survival is just a matter of waiting for the wind to shift. Shell shock isn't something they talk about openly. Not really. They call it nerves, or lack of discipline, or, if they're feeling generous, fatigue. But you've seen it, felt it, lived beside it. You've watched perfectly good men turn into shells of themselves, jittering, stammering, blinking at walls like they're watching ghosts dance. The first time you see it up close, it's a lad named Murphy, quiet fellow, used to sing when he shaved. One morning after a night of heavy shelling, he's just not there anymore. His body is, but his eyes look past everything. He trembles like a leaf in a storm, and when someone gently asks him a question, he flinches like they screamed. He doesn't speak for 2 days. Some say he's faking. Others say he'll snap out of it. You don't say anything, because deep down, you know it could be you next. It's not the loud moments that do it. It's the slow ones, the waiting, the long stretches of silence between shellings, between stand-tos, between gas alerts. That's when your brain starts replaying things you'd rather forget. The look in someone's eyes when they realize they won't make it. The way a hand sticks out of the mud like it's still reaching. The sound of a man crying in a crater, not from pain, but from being done. Historians still debate what caused shell shock. Was it the physical effect of blasts on the brain, or the psychological toll of constant, inescapable fear? The answer's probably both. But you don't care what caused it. You just hope it doesn't find you. You start noticing the signs in yourself. The twitch that wasn't there before. The way you jump at certain sounds, even harmless ones like a dropped mug. You forget words mid-sentence. Sometimes you just stare into space for minutes and don't even realize it until someone snaps their fingers in front of your face. There's a private in the next company who screams in his sleep. Every night. Same scream. High, brittle, desperate. He wakes the whole trench. Someone tried to gag him once, said it was scaring the lads. You wanted to fight them for it. You didn't. You just sat there, listening to him sob through the cloth. One officer says he'll be sent back, maladjusted, like he's a faulty screw, not a man who's been living with death for months. They don't all scream, though. Some just vanish. Not physically, But you can tell. Eyes go glassy, voices flatten. You ask them a question, and they answer like they're reading from a card. Yes, corporal. No, corporal. You know they're not really here anymore. There's talk of treatment, rest camps, quiet places, far from the line with soft beds and softer expectations. But they're few, and getting there often takes more courage than staying, admitting you're broken in a place built on endurance. That's a battlefield of its own. Still, you try to protect your mind. You write, even if it's nonsense, even if it's just lists of food, of people you miss, of things you'll never take for granted again. You sing old songs under your breath. You play cards with dirty fingers and pretend the rules matter. Baker once made up an entire game using buttons and chalk. You all played it like it was poker at Buckingham Palace. Sometimes laughter helps. That dry, cracked kind of laughter that sounds too loud and ends too quickly. You joke about the rats, about the food, about the officers. Anything to remind yourselves you're still human. There's one lad who talks to a doll, swears it belonged to his sister, carries it in his pocket. Once, a new recruit laughed at him. You and 3 others made sure he didn't laugh again, not because you liked the doll, but because everyone's hanging on by something. You start creating little rituals. Tap your helmet 3 times before patrol. Step with your left foot first when climbing the trench ladder. Tie your laces a certain way. It doesn't matter if it's silly. It's yours. It's control in a place built to strip you of it. And when it gets too much, when your hands won't stop shaking and your chest feels like it's caving in, you walk, just back and forth, trench to trench, duckboard to duckboard. You count the steps, you name the sandbags, anything to stay anchored. Sometimes you talk to the dead, not in a dramatic, haunted way, more like casual conversation. Wish you could see this messmate, you mumble, passing the spot where Jenkins fell. Or you'd laugh at Baker's haircut as you clean your rifle. It helps. It fills the silence, makes the loss feel less permanent. The officers don't get it, or pretend not to. Some call it weakness. A few, very few, understand. One captain, grizzled and quiet, once said to you, "The trick is not pretending it doesn't hurt. It's pretending it doesn't break you." You nod, like you agree. You're not sure you do. There are days when you feel like your mind is a trench, two collapsing slowly at the edges, water seeping in support beams, cracking under pressure. You patch it, reinforce it, hope no one notices. Because out here, once the cracks show, it's hard to hide them. But still, every morning, you wake up, still in the trench, still in your own skin, still whispering to yourself that you're fine, because you have to be, because the man next to you is watching, and if you fall apart, he might too. Your helmet has a name now, not officially, of course. No one issues you a naming ceremony with bugles and confetti. It just happens. One morning, you wake up, thump it on your head, and mutter, "Come on, Doris, don't let me down today." And from that point on, she's Doris, a dented olive-colored metal saint perched above your eyebrows. The Brody helmet, shallow, wide-brimmed, affectionately nicknamed the Soup Bowl, is both joke and lifeline. At first it felt clumsy, always slipping sideways, or catching the rain at the worst angle. But now it's the only thing between your scalp and whatever hell decides to fall from the sky next. It's not bulletproof. They tell you that right away. It's not going to stop a sniper round or a shell fragment traveling faster than your thoughts, but it might deflect shrapnel. It might bounce off a bit of falling debris. Historians still argue whether its flat dish-like shape saved more lives or simply made it easier to collect rainwater. You've used it for that, by the way, collecting water and washing socks and bailing out mini floods in the dugout. Once you saw someone eat porridge out of theirs. Another time a man used it to trap a rat. One lad even used it as a pillow, which was ambitious considering the shape. But the most bizarre use of all, a mirror. Sort of. After a light polish with a rag and some spit, it reflects your face just enough to remind you that yes, you still have one. You stare at yourself, mud-smeared, tired, older than your age, and then you put Doris back on and pretend the reflection didn't bother you. The ritual of checking your helmet becomes almost superstitious. Before a patrol, you tap it twice. Before going over the top, you adjust the strap exactly how you like it, not too tight, not too loose. You'd swear it changes your luck. Baker once forgot his helmet before a dig and got clipped by a chunk of wood from a shell-blasted plank. Nothing major, just a cut. But ever since then, he talks to his helmet like it's a pet. You do too sometimes. Don't rattle today, Doris. Keep the rain out, will you? You know she can't hear. That's not the point. Helmets become a strange currency among the men. Yours has a dent. That's a story. A scratch. That's history. One soldier has tally marks etched along the brim. No one asks what they represent. Another painted a red stripe along the side. To confuse the snipers, he says, "You're not sure that's how snipers work, but you admire the creativity." During shelling, you crouch, arms over your head, helmet pulled low. It doesn't stop the terror, but it makes you feel a fraction safer, like holding a newspaper over your head in a thunderstorm. Utterly useless, but comforting. And then, inevitably, there's the moment when you're not wearing it. Maybe it's just for a second. You take it off to scratch, or wash your face, or swap it for your gas mask. And that is when the shell hits nearby. The thunderclap sends vibrations up your spine, and suddenly you're on the ground, ears ringing dust, choking your throat, and your first thought before, am I alive, or is that my leg is, where's my helmet? You scramble. You find it, knocked off, scuffed upside down. You press it back onto your skull like it's part of you. Only then do you check your limbs. Only then do you breathe. Later, you joke about it. Wouldn't be caught dead without my hat. The others laugh. You don't mention how close you came to making that joke literal. In some trenches, helmets have decorations. Cards tucked into the rim, dried flowers, bits of wire. One lad had a tiny wooden rabbit glued to the top until it got shot clean off during a patrol. Lucky charm, he says afterward, completely straight-faced. There's a kind of strange intimacy in seeing rows of helmets lined up at night, all tilted differently, some resting on knees, others hung on rifle butts. It's like a crowd of silent observers watching over you, ghosts in training. You once lent your helmet to a new recruit who'd lost his, just for a short patrol. He never came back. You got it returned, eventually, dented, blood-specked, wrapped in a cloth like it was ashamed. You cleaned it in silence. You didn't rename it. Still Doris. But you don't lend it out again. The officers get different helmets, shinier. Sometimes they have insignia. You think they look ridiculous, like parade floats in a sewer. But you don't say anything. Let them have their pride. Yours is in dents and grime, and that one patch of rust you swear looks like a map of Wales. At night, you rest it beside you. Not under your head too awkward, but close enough to reach with one hand. You've gotten good at putting it on half asleep, eyes still shut. Once you even dreamed of it. In the dream, you were home, but still wearing it, sitting at the dinner table, helmet on fork in hand. No one mentioned it. You woke up sweating. Sometimes you wonder what you'll do with it after, if there is an after. Will you hang it on the wall? Keep it in a box? Toss it in the sea? Probably none of those. Probably you'll just hold it once in a while, feel the weight. Remember the sound it made in the rain. Because it wasn't just a helmet. It was a bowl, a basin, a shield, a symbol. It was Doris, and she kept your head attached to your shoulders. So you owe her. The trench has gone silent, not the peaceful kind of silence, not the kind that makes you think of libraries or snowfall or church pews. No, this is the kind of silence that presses in on your ears, makes your spine itch, and feels like it's holding its breath just to scare you. Everyone feels it. You glance at Baker, and even he's not saying anything. That's when you know something's off. Baker's the kind of man who'd crack a joke at his own funeral. But now he's just sitting, one leg twitching, hands idle, eyes locked on the far edge of the trench. It's been hours since anything happened. No shelling, no sniper fire, no whistles, no gas alarms. The birds are chirping, and that should be comforting, but it's not. It's eerie. It's wrong. Your nerves fray like old rope. You want something, anything, to break the tension. A shout, a bang, even a rat fight would help. But there's nothing except the rustle of wind over sandbags and the occasional drip of water down a trench wall. Lulls in combat are supposed to be restful, a chance to regroup, clean your gear, maybe even nap. But sometimes, like now, they feel more terrifying than a firefight. Because at least when the guns are going off, you know where the danger is. In the silence, your imagination becomes the enemy. You begin inventing things. You swear you hear footsteps beyond the wire. You think someone's watching you from that shadowy patch under the collapsed duckboard. You convince yourself that the enemy is tunneling under you right now, ready to blow the whole section sky high. Historians still argue about how much psychological damage was caused not by violence but by its absence. You scratch your leg. Was that a noise? No, just Baker shifting his weight. You twitch. Someone drops a mug. It clatters. Everyone jumps. A man swears softly. You begin to miss the rhythm of shelling, not the destruction, not the screams, but the structure, the horrible, reliable cadence of it, the way your body learned when to duck, when to breathe, when to run. This stillness has no pattern, no sense, just the gnawing presence of something that hasn't happened yet. A few lads try to pass the time. Cards come out, their edges damp and curling. Someone sketches a crude drawing of a general with pig ears. You chuckle, then stop. The laugh sounds too loud, like it doesn't belong here. You try writing, but your pencil feels clumsy. The words won't come. Every letter feels like a lie. It's quiet today, you scribble. Then you cross it out. Too ominous. You write, "We're holding the line." Then cross that out too. Eventually, you just draw a small circle and shade it in over and over. You eat, slowly, mechanically. The same old bully beef and biscuit. You chew until your jaw hurts, not because you're hungry, but because the motion fills the time. The others are doing the same, chewing, scratching, breathing, blinking like ghosts rehearsing for a life they're not sure they'll return to. The sun moves. You can see it in the shadows, shifting on the trench walls. No one mentions it. Time passing just means one more hour survived, or one closer to whatever this silence is hiding. One of the lads tries to break the tension. "Maybe they forgot we're here," he says. Baker answers, "Maybe they're digging a tunnel under us, and we're sitting on top of next Tuesday's crater. Maybe someone else mutters they're dead, all of them, and we're alone." Nobody laughs at that one. You start to feel the trench itself is alive, breathing through the cracks, watching through the slits in the sandbags. When you sit still long enough, you swear the boards are whispering. You shift. You tell yourself it's just your brain trying to fill the gap. But still, you listen harder. Eventually, the officer wanders through. He doesn't say much, just nods. You can tell he's unnerved too. His boots are clean, just arrived from somewhere else probably. His eyes scan the horizon like he expects it to explode. He leaves. You almost wish he'd said something useless like, "Keep up the good work." Even that would have punctured the quiet. By late afternoon, the sun's too low to be warm, but too high to bring the relief of darkness. The in-between light makes everything look unreal, like a photograph held too close to your face. You try to nap. Doesn't work. Every creak is a threat. Every gust of wind sounds like boots. Baker starts humming, low, tuneless. You don't stop him. Then finally, just as the sun kisses the edge of the sky, tuned, far off. One pop, then another. Gunfire. Distant, but real. You feel the whole trench exhale, like the war remembered it existed, like the story resumed after being stuck on pause. You don't even care who's firing. You just know something is happening now. The pressure breaks. Men start talking again. Someone swears. Someone else finishes a song. You feel like you can breathe properly for the first time in hours. The enemy didn't attack. The trench didn't flood. The sky didn't fall. But the silence did end. And somehow that's enough to keep going. Because you've learned something important out here. Loud is scary. But quiet is worse. It starts with a shout, short, sharp, familiar. Male. No matter how tired you are, how mud-logged, lice-ridden, or mentally drained that word hits you like caffeine, straight to the soul. Men stir, heads lift. A few lads rise from their dugouts like sleepwalking corpses who suddenly remembered they have unfinished business with hope. You scramble toward the delivery like it's your last chance at humanity. A canvas sack, stained and sagging, is plopped onto a crate and out spill envelopes, small boxes, twisted bits of string, and the scent of somewhere else. Your name is called. Once. Twice. Then there it is. A small wrinkled letter, your name scrawled in a familiar hand. You take it, like it might vanish if you blink. Fingers trembling, you hold it for a moment before opening it. That moment, that breath, it's everything. The letter is short. Your sister's writing again. She talks about the neighbors, about the cat stealing a sausage, about your dad pretending he doesn't miss you. You can almost hear her voice as your eyes drift over the words. She ends with, "Please keep safe and write soon." You clutch it to your chest like armor. Mail call doesn't fix anything, but it's the emotional IV drip everyone's been quietly dying without. Even the smallest note from home feels like a lifeline tossed into quicksand. You see it in every man's eyes, those moments when they fold open a piece of home and breathe like they haven't in weeks. Parcels are rarer, but when they come, the trench turns festive. One lad opens a tin of homemade toffee and becomes an instant legend. Another gets socks hand-knitted and smelling faintly of lavender. He passes them around for everyone to smell before shoving them deep into his boots with reverence. You get a bar of chocolate. It's soft from the journey, slightly melted, but you'd trade your rifle for it. You break it into pieces, small ones, and share them with Baker and two others. You chew slowly, eyes half closed, pretending for just a moment that you're not surrounded by rot filth and war. Even the packaging becomes treasure. String is saved for tying gear. Boxes are repurposed into shelves. Wrapping paper is folded neatly and kept in pockets like photos. Someone once used a biscuit tin to brew tea. You learn to make use of everything, even the smell of soap clinging to the edges of the box. You don't always get mail. Some days your name isn't called, and those are the worst. You smile like it doesn't matter. Probably delayed, you say. Post is slow, but it eats at you, makes you wonder if they forgot. Or worse, if something happened and no one wants to tell you. Sometimes men don't get mail for weeks. They start pretending they don't care. Probably for the best, one says. Hate reading anyway. But you see how they linger near the sack, how their eyes dart every time a new letter is called. You learn the art of the half-lie. In your letters, you talk about the food, not bad, and the weather a bit wet. You leave out the nightmares, the trench rot, the friend who stopped blinking. You censor yourself so your family won't have to. Censorship is a thing, of course. The officers read your letters before they go out, crossing out anything they deem too real. No numbers, no locations, no vivid details of death. One lad got half his letter returned looking like a redacted spy file. He turned it into a drawing of a duck. Still you write, because writing is a way of saying, I'm still me. And reading is a way of hearing, so are we. Some men read their letters aloud. Others do it in secret. A few just hold the envelope, never opening it, as if the promise of good news is safer than knowing for sure. You remember the day Baker didn't get one, just sat there, pretending his tea needed more stirring. You gave him half of yours. She wrote about jam, you said, handing over the paper. Imagine that. Jam. He read it like scripture. One night a parcel arrives for a lad who'd died 2 days before. No one says anything. The sergeant opens it silently. Inside a scarf, a small tin of biscuits, and a letter from his mum. The scarf gets passed around the dugout. Everyone touches it. No one speaks. The biscuits are shared out, one each. No one jokes. The letter is folded back up and tucked into the lad's pocket before they bury him. Sometimes mail goes missing, gets destroyed. Once a carrier bag caught fire from a stray ember. Gone 40 letters and 2 boxes of peppermint. The trench mourned like it was a funeral. You've seen lads survive bullet wounds with more composure than they show after losing a parcel. And then, of course, there's the letter. You know the one. It comes in a different envelope, marked official, delivered by hand. You've seen what it does. One man got it and just sat still for hours. No tears, just stillness. Another read it, tore it into pieces, then asked for a light for his cigarette, like nothing happened. When someone gets that letter, you don't ask. You just sit beside them, silent, solid present. That's enough. Mail in the trenches is more than communication. It's a heartbeat, a reminder that you're still tethered to the world beyond the mud and madness, that somewhere someone is thinking of you, remembering you, waiting. So every time you hear that call, mail, you run, even if you're limping, even if your stomach's empty and your fingers are frozen. You run, because that letter might be the difference between another day and your last, because that letter might just say, you still matter. Your feet are no longer your feet. They're strange, bloated things that throb when you walk and squelch when you sit. They smell like wet rags left in a tomb, and if you dared to peel off your socks, which you won't, you'd probably discover something that belongs more in a horror novel than on a human body. Trench foot. It starts as a tingle, a bit of numbness. You ignore it because there's always something more urgent to worry about. Bullets, rats, that soup you're not sure was food. But then it grows. Your toes feel stiff, then sore, then like someone replaced your boots with buckets full of stones and knives. You try drying them. You really do. But when everything around you is soaked, your boots, your socks, the boards, the air, what's left, you sleep with your boots on, which makes it worse. You march through muck and sewage, which makes it worse. You don't change socks for 3 days. Worse. Eventually, you can't ignore it anymore. The pain grows sharp, then weirdly distant. You poke your heel and don't feel a thing. Not good. You remember what they said in training? Keep your feet dry, change socks daily. A cruel joke out here. You'd need divine intervention for dry socks. You report to the medic. He peels your boot off like he's unwrapping a dead rat, and the smell hits both of you like a slap. He doesn't gag. You respect that. He just says, "Yeah, that's a good one." He applies something thick and cold and wraps your foot in bandages that feel like lies. You ask, "Is it bad?" He shrugs, still attached. So, you've got that going. You limp back to your section boots, loosely tied, hoping the foot fairy visits during the night. She doesn't. Trench foot is the great equalizer. Officers, privates, cooks, it doesn't care. Once a lieutenant fainted when his boot came off. His toes had turned black. They amputated 3. "He's going home," someone said, almost enviously. And, yes, some envy those who get sent home for it, not because of the pain, but because a hospital bed in England sounds like paradise. Clean sheets, nurses who don't smell like gunpowder, warm meals, the luxury of horizontal sleep. But most of you soldier through. You rub whale oil on your feet. If there's any left, you swap socks with other lads, yes, even used ones, because less wet is still an upgrade. Baker once offered his last chocolate square for a pair that was only mildly moldy. Worth it. You develop rituals. Take your boots off for 5 minutes. During stand-down air, your toes mutter prayers to the gods of circulation. You wring out your socks, hang them over a spent shell casing like it's a clothesline, and pretend you're civilized. The trench itself doesn't help. The boards are warped. Water sits stagnant in every depression. Some parts are knee-deep sludge. Others just shallow puddles that hide sharp metal and other less pleasant surprises. You once stepped into something soft that squirmed. You didn't ask questions. Rain makes it worse. Always. You dread the soft patter on your helmet. It means hours, maybe days of wading through brown soup, your skin pruning and softening until it tears at the slightest touch. You see men carried out on stretchers, not from gunshots, but from infection. One bloke's foot ballooned until it split open. Another had his toenails peel off like old paint. You try not to look, but you do, because curiosity is stronger than disgust. Historians still debate how much trench foot affected overall fighting capacity. You could settle it for them. It's hard to win a war when half your force walks like drunk penguins. Yet somehow you adapt. You pad your boots with scraps of cloth. You become obsessed with dry spots, guarding them like treasure. You curse men who trudge through with muddy boots spreading dampness like a plague. You become a foot connoisseur. How's the heel feel today is a valid question. Baker starts naming his feet. Left is Mildred. Right is Bernard. He talks to them at night like they're elderly relatives. Bernard's looking angry today, he says. Needs a holiday. You don't laugh, not because it's not funny, but because you've started naming yours too. You hear rumors of experimental socks made of new materials. Some say they repel water. Others say they're just more wool. A man swears someone in the artillery got silk socks. Silk. The idea makes you weep inside. Foot inspections become routine. The officers gather you up bark orders and watch as you peel off layers like onions in a stew. They check for color smell rot. Sometimes they nod. Sometimes they wince. You hope for a nod. The worst part, it's hard to describe. It's not a wound, not an injury you can point at. It's a slow breakdown, a surrender of skin and blood vessels and nerve endings. It's watching part of your body turn against you in real time. But even in all of it, there's dark humor. One man jokes he's evolving. Soon I'll have flippers. Another says he's growing trench barnacles. Baker offers to carve a small raft out of his boot so his foot can escape. You laugh, because if you don't, your soul might start rotting too. And then, one morning, the sky clears. The sun for once decides to bless you. You sit on the edge of the trench boots, off feet bear sunlight on your soles. It feels indecent, almost luxurious. You close your eyes and pretend you're back home, toes in a river, nothing but sky above. For a minute, the war disappears. It's just you, the sun, and your stubborn, aching, beloved feet, still attached, still walking, still yours. The grave is shallow, just deep enough to keep the rats out probably. No headstone, no fanfare. Just a crude cross fashioned from broken planks lashed together with bootlaces and placed upright into the churned earth like a reluctant flag. You don't know the man's name. He was in another company, maybe even another regiment. You never spoke. But now you're holding one end of his stretcher boots, slipping in the mud, trying to keep your grip as the body lolls slightly with each uneven step. He's wrapped in a ground sheet, tied with twine. His helmet sits on his chest like an apology. This is how it's done. You dig together in silence. The earth gives way slowly, sticky, heavy, wet with last night's rain. It clings to your spade like it resents your effort. Each motion takes effort, each breath more so. Your arms ache, but you don't stop. You can't stop. because someone has to do it. And today that someone is you. When the hole is done roughly rectangular, roughly level, you lower him in. You do it gently. You always do. It doesn't matter if you knew him. It doesn't matter what uniform he wore yesterday, or whether he snored or smoked or prayed. He's still a man. And now he's not. There are no priests, no music. Sometimes an officer says a few words. Most of the time it's just silence. You stare down at him, this anonymous figure who could have been you, who might be you tomorrow or today. If the shell lands 5 feet to the left, you wonder where he's from, what his mother looks like, whether he used to play football or sing in pubs or had a favorite biscuit. Then you stop wondering, because wondering hurts. The dirt goes back in, fast, efficient, not because you're cold, but because there are always more jobs to do. Someone has to clean the rifles. Someone has to cook the rations. Someone has to fill the sandbags. Even in death, the war does not pause. Later, a few of you fashion a sign, just a bit of board and some charcoal scribbled on it. Unknown, 1916. Someone adds a small flower, plucked from God knows where. A poppy, maybe. The kind that still grows here despite everything. You nod in thanks. No one speaks. Graves are everywhere. Some are neat in long rows, back where the field hospitals are. Those are marked, registered, mapped. They'll be remembered. But most the ones like this are quick and dirty, half lost, to the elements, waiting to be discovered by someone decades from now, if ever. You pass them every day, little mounds beside the trench behind the dugout, along the duckboards, sometimes marked, sometimes not. You step around them, nod at them occasionally, whisper to them, "Sorry." You say once after tripping over one in the dark. You don't know why you said it. It just felt right. Baker keeps a list. Names, numbers, nicknames. He scratches them in a small notebook with the corner torn off. It's not official. It's for him. You've seen him sit quietly after a battle, writing a name down, lips moving like he's praying, or maybe just trying to remember the sound of their voice. One evening you find a helmet on a stick planted beside a sapling near the trench wall. Someone's tried to carve initials into it, but the mud's already eating away at the wood. You stand there for a while. Say nothing, just stand. There's a phrase someone wrote in chalk on a trench post once: we bury them quickly because we can't bury them deep. You don't know who wrote it. Maybe it was meant to be literal, maybe poetic. Either way, it sticks in your mind. And it's true. There's no time for grief here. No room. You carry the loss with you quietly, like a stone in your boot. It rubs. It aches. But you walk on anyway. Sometimes, though, not often, you feel it break through. A man breaks down after burying his friend. Another goes quiet for 3 days. One punches a wall until his knuckles bleed. You don't blame them. You just hand them a bandage, a cigarette, or a nod that says, "I get it. I'm there too." One night a shell lands behind the trench and blows an old grave wide open. You see it in the mourning cloth, scraps, bone a boot. The cross is gone. You and a few others put it back together. You don't talk while doing it. You just do it, because dignity is one of the few things you still have, and still the graveyards grow. Somewhere beyond the line, beyond the fog, and wire men in clean uniforms are mapping them out, planning cemeteries, tallying names, writing letters. But here on the front, it's just you and a shovel and someone who used to breathe. Sometimes you wonder what will happen to your own body if it comes to that. Will they remember your name? Will someone say something nice? Or will it be quick, shallow, forgotten? You hope for a poppy, a nameplate if they have the time, a friend who remembers what you looked like when you laughed. That's enough. That's everything. Eventually something strange happens. The war becomes a routine, not comfortable, not safe, but familiar, like a terrible roommate who never leaves, drinks your tea, and occasionally sets the kitchen on fire. You still flinch at loud noises, still jump at whistles, but you also start to anticipate them. The chaos takes on a pattern. You find yourself adjusting. You wake at the same hour, just before stand to, pull on the same boots, still damp, drink the same brown liquid and pretend it's tea. You check your rifle like you're folding a napkin, mechanical, methodical, mind numb just enough to function. Dig, eat, clean, write, wait. That's the rhythm now. You even start to look forward to certain tasks. Cleaning your gear becomes meditative. Polishing your bayonet gives you purpose. Even emptying the latrine well, maybe not that, but it's something to do. And in the trenches, doing something is everything. Your body adapts too. You sleep when you can, curled like a question mark under a plank or propped awkwardly against a wall. You eat whatever's given to you and thank it for not crawling. You stop noticing smells, yours, theirs, the trenches. They all blend into one constant aroma of war. You begin to recognize the sound of different shells. That one, distant, fine. The next, close. Brace. The big ones drop to the mud and count to 5. You're not an expert, but your instincts are getting good at identifying what might kill you and what will just make you swear under your breath. You and Baker create a game. Guess that boom. You each call out the type of shell after the explosion. If you're right, you win a point. If you're wrong, you owe the other your last biscuit. You're losing. Baker swears it's his special talent. Comes from my time working near train yards, he says, as if explosions and freight cars are cousins. You learn to read the trench, too. The way the duckboards shift when someone heavy walks. The way the mud changes color before it collapses. The way rats move when something's about to go wrong. You begin to notice the small signs, tiny details that would have escaped you weeks ago. Survival is in the details. And the men around you, you know their habits now. You know who snores, who sings in their sleep, who hoards socks, who pretends to write letters, and who actually does. There's a kind of intimacy that only war can forge. You've seen these men weep, scream, bleed. They've seen you soil yourself during an artillery barrage and never mentioned it again. That's love in its own terrible way. Conversations become loops. What would you eat right now if you could? What's the first thing you'll do when you get home? Would you rather lose a hand or a foot? The answers change. The questions don't. One lad keeps a pebble in his pocket, says it's from his garden. He rubs it when he's scared. Another carries a tiny Bible, though you've never seen him open it. A third has a deck of cards and insists the Queen of Hearts is bad luck. She's bent at the corner from overuse. You all have your thing. Yours is that tiny photo tucked inside your breast pocket. The corners are frayed. The face is fading. But you still touch it sometimes when no one's looking. Not for luck, for memory. Laughter finds its way in too. Not the carefree kind, but the dry, absurd humor that only exists where nothing makes sense. Like the time a rat stole an entire sausage from the cook's pocket while he wasn't looking, or when someone built a snowman during winter's stand-to and named it General Haig, or when Baker convinced a new recruit that the pigeons were spies. German birds, he said. See the glint in their eyes? The recruit started throwing stones. For a week, you laughed until your ribs hurt. Then the next day, someone stepped on a mine and the trench went quiet again. That's how it works. Joy on a string. Tugged away just as you reach for it. But even in that cycle, hope, humor, horror, there's something resembling life. You start marking time, not by dates, but by small moments. The week Baker shaved half his mustache, the time the tea froze in the cup, the day Jenkins fell asleep standing up. Your calendar is emotional, not numerical. There's comfort in repetition. Even misery, when predictable, loses some of its sting. You stop asking, will this end? And start asking, what next? And that shift, quiet, unnoticed, is what keeps you moving forward. The war doesn't feel like a chapter anymore. It's just your normal. You see a man brush his teeth with powdered charcoal and think, how civilized. You see another brushing mud off a dead man's boots and think, that's considerate. You catch yourself folding your uniform before lying down in a hole and laugh at the absurdity. You're a creature now, a part of the trench. You know its rhythms, its moods, its breath. And though you don't love it, you hate it. In fact, you understand it. You belong to it, just like it belongs to you. It starts with a cough, a sharp, sudden, ridiculous little cough during a supply check. You glance over, expecting someone to shush the culprit or throw a stale biscuit at him. But instead you see Baker doubled over, red-faced, and gasping tears streaming down his cheeks. Not from laughter, not from smoke, just from laughing so hard he can't breathe. What is it, you ask, already chuckling because, well, laughter is rare and contagious here. He tries to answer, but he can't speak. He just points, hand shaking, toward a pile of sandbags. There, perched perfectly still like a stuffed animal, is a cat. A real one. Orange, grumpy, wearing what appears to be a tiny cap made out of a torn sock. Corporal Whiskers, someone says solemnly. You lose it. The trench explodes not from shells, but from pure, gasping, bent-over, ugly, wonderful laughter. Men are wheezing, wiping eyes, collapsing onto crates like drunks. One lad falls into the mud and doesn't even try to get up. Another says, "I think I peed," and no one even judges him. You laugh until your ribs hurt, until you forget your name, until you forget briefly where you are. And that right there might be the most important moment of your entire war. It's not just the cat, or the absurdity of someone stitching a cap for it. It's the break, the blessed, glorious fracture in the endless weight pressing down on all of you. Laughter becomes a weapon here, a shield, a whispered rebellion against the mud and madness. After that, everything is funny. The biscuit that crumbles into dust before it reaches your mouth. Hilarious. The officer who tripped over a rat and blamed the Kaiser. Brilliant. The time someone used his helmet to fry an egg and ended up with something that looked like a burnt pancake wearing armor. Incredible. You're not losing it. You're surviving it. There's a moment during a gas drill when everyone's fumbling with their masks and someone unable to find his just shouts, "Tell my mother I never learned to whistle," before diving headfirst into a dugout. You giggle like a school child for 10 minutes. Even the worst moments can have a punchline. One night a shell lands way too close. Everyone dives. Mud showers the trench. When it clears, you look over, and Baker is standing completely still, a sandbag draped perfectly over his head like a wig. He just shrugs and says, "Does it suit me?" You nearly pass out laughing. Historians often talk about morale in the trenches, rations, leadership letters from home. But what they don't always emphasize is the role of humor. Not polite chuckles or clever wit, but gut-level spit-up-your-tea laughter, the kind that rewires your brain for a few sweet seconds and makes you forget the rat-bitten corner of reality you currently inhabit. And it's not just jokes. It's impressions, skit songs, rewritten with rude lyrics. There's a man in your company who does an impersonation of your captain, so accurate people genuinely check twice when they hear it. He once did the entire stand-to briefing while wearing a mop as a mustache. The captain heard it and said nothing, which is a gift in itself. Another fellow writes mock letters from General Mudd, ordering everyone to soak their socks and surrender their dignity. You pin one to the dugout wall. Everyone signs it. Sometimes the laughter comes at your own expense. You trip over a board, land face first in something unmentionable. They laugh. You laugh harder, because if you don't laugh, you'll scream. And you're not ready to scream today. There's a moment you won't forget. Rain's falling sideways. You're soaked, shaking, miserable. Then someone starts singing, loudly, off-key, horribly. It's "God Save the King," but the lyrics are all wrong. Something about sausages and a queen with muddy boots. You join in. Everyone does. The sound is horrendous, beautiful. You're yelling nonsense into the storm with a dozen other men who smell like socks and fear, and for just that moment, you are alive. There's a night when one of the lads makes a puppet show out of 2 boots and a candle. The characters are General Incompetence and Sergeant Lice. The storyline, a doomed mission to find dry socks. The performance ends when one boot catches fire and everyone scrambles to put it out before the trench goes up in flames. It's the best show you've ever seen. And then there's the dark humor. A man comes back from patrol, white as a sheet, and says, "Well, I found Jenkins, just not all of him." Someone says, "Did you bring the good half?" And everyone laughs. Not because it's funny, but because what else can you do? Humor becomes the only way to process what's happening. It's shorthand. It's therapy. It's a refusal to let despair be the only voice in your head. Even the rats become part of the jokes. One's named Otto von Bite Us. Another is declared the quartermaster because he keeps stealing rations. Someone draws a tiny iron cross on a scrap of paper and tapes it to one particularly fat specimen. You see that rat later running across the trench like he owns the place. You salute him. And when the days get dark, when letters stop coming, when your boots are soaked through, when the silence is too loud, those moments of laughter echo louder than any explosion. Because in this place, joy is rebellion. It doesn't last, of course. It never does. The shelling resumes. The rations sour. Someone doesn't come back from patrol. But for that brief time, for those sacred minutes, you laughed so hard you forgot to be afraid. And that might just be the greatest victory of all. The moonlight is sharp tonight. Not gentle, not romantic, sharp. It cuts across no man's land in pale ribbons, turning the twisted wire and cratered earth into something ghostly and skeletal. Beautiful, in a way that only something deadly can be. You crouch low in the trench, fingers tightening around your rifle, and try not to breathe too loud. You're on patrol. Night patrol. The phrase alone makes your stomach tighten. It's not quite combat, not quite recon, not quite suicide, but it flirts with all three. Your job tonight is simple on paper. Crawl into no man's land, check the condition of the wire. Look for enemy movement, maybe drop a listening device in a shell hole, then crawl back. Easy, except it's never easy. You climb over the parapet slowly, boots catching on the sandbag's breath held so tight your lungs might mutiny. The air outside the trench feels wider, colder. It wraps around your skin like wet gauze. You flatten yourself to the ground and begin to crawl. Every sound matters out here. The creak of your webbing, the soft suck of your knee in mud, the distant click of someone else's boot friend or foe, impossible to tell. Even your heartbeat seems too loud, pounding against the inside of your helmet like a warning drum. There's no cover, just shadows. Craters become your allies. You slide into one roll to your side. Listen. Nothing. Just wind. You glance up, and the moon stares back like an indifferent god. There's no cloud cover tonight. No fog. Just clear silver light, making sure everyone can see everything. Great. You move again slowly, hands searching the earth ahead. before your knees follow. The barbed wire looms closer, coiled, rusted, glinting like a necklace for a corpse. You reach it and check the gaps. Still intact. No sign of tampering. No footsteps. No corpses today. But you don't relax. Because something always feels wrong out here. It's too quiet. You glance to your left. Baker is crawling just behind you, his face ghostly in the moonlight, lips pressed into a thin line. He nods once. You nod back. No talking. Talking out here gets you dead. A sudden noise. Snap. You freeze. It's small, close, like a twig underfoot. You lower your body flat to the earth, eyes scanning, ears straining. There, movement, just beyond the wire. A shape, no two. You can't tell if they've seen you. You don't breathe. Baker stops moving. Then the figures pause. They whisper in a language you don't speak, but know well. German. They're patrolling too. You lie there for what feels like a century, trying not to tremble. The enemy soldiers move slowly, their outlines crisp in the moonlight. You're close enough to see their breath, close enough to imagine reaching out and grabbing their boots. Then just as silently they move on. You exhale. Baker does too, but it sounds like a prayer. You wait 5 more minutes, just in case. Then you start to crawl back. No sudden moves, no noise. Just the slow, steady return to your side of the line. Every meter feels longer than the last. When you reach the parapet again, you grip the wood, haul yourself up and over, and drop into the trench like a sack of flour. Your knees shake. Your mouth tastes like dirt. You want to throw up, but you don't. Baker flops down beside you and mutters, "Lovely evening for a stroll." You laugh. A sharp, breathless wheeze of relief. You're alive, still in one piece. You take off your helmet and hold it in your lap like a baby bird. Night patrols do something to your mind. They remind you that this war is not just guns and gas and screaming. It's also silence. It's proximity. It's the knowledge that a man with a family and a name just passed within arm's reach, and you didn't shoot him. Not because you're merciful, but because neither of you were ordered to yet. Sometimes you wonder what it would be like to talk to them, to sit in a crater with some Bavarian farmer and compare foot rot. You imagine lighting cigarettes together, showing off photographs of wives, maybe playing a quiet game of cards until the moon goes down. You've heard stories, Christmas truces, impromptu football matches. Maybe they're true. Maybe they're lies people tell to stay sane. You've never seen one, but you want to believe in them. Because out there, under that moonlight, everyone looks human again. Not monsters, not enemies. Just scared, tired men trying not to die in the mud. Back in the trench, you write a note in your book, barbed wire intact. 2 enemy patrols. No shots fired. It sounds clean, clinical. It doesn't say, "My heart stopped. I saw a man blink. I nearly screamed. But no one wants that version. You close the book and lie back against the wall. Your clothes are soaked. Your boots squelch. Baker hands you a crust of biscuit. You eat it in silence. Someone down the line asks, "Anything out there?" You pause. Then say, "Just the moon." It starts as a whisper. One man hears it from a passing runner. Another catches it in a letter with half the words blacked out. "Peace," they say. Peace is coming. You want to believe it. You really do. But you've learned not to trust good news out here. It usually comes just before something explodes. Still, the rumor spreads like warmth through cold fingers. The war might be over by Christmas, someone says. Talks are happening. The Americans are pushing hard. Germany's collapsing. They're out of food. Everyone has a source. No one has proof, and no one wants to be the first to hope. Baker snorts when he hears it. Heard that one in 1915 and 1916. I'll believe it when someone plays the bugle backwards and hands me a bloody croissant. But his eyes linger on the horizon a little longer than usual. His voice softens when he says it. You tell yourself not to hope. You repeat it, don't hope. But it sneaks in anyway. Quiet, traitorous, persistent. Because your boots are more holes than leather. Your hands don't stop shaking. Your letters home are starting to sound like echoes. And the idea that this might end, that you might go home, not in a box, but in a train car, with windows. It pulls at something in your chest you thought you buried weeks ago. The officers are tight-lipped, but they're reading dispatches more closely now, writing more letters of their own. One captain even smiled last night, just once. No one mentioned it. You were all too stunned. You start noticing the little things. The machine gun that didn't fire this morning. The artillery that paused for a whole 2 hours yesterday. The sky blue, cloudless, almost obscene in its serenity. It's not quiet, but it's quieter. And that quiet brings its own kind of fear. Because if peace really is coming, then everything you've done starts to feel heavier. Every loss, every frozen night, every buried friend suddenly has to mean something. If this all ends, what was the point? Historians still argue whether peace crept in like fog or crashed down like thunder. For you, it feels like being held at the edge of something good and told, not yet. You spend your evenings watching the line, not for enemy movement, but for signs of change. You see a German patrol across no man's land. They don't fire. Neither do you. There's a pause, a look. One raises a hand, just slightly, not a wave, not quite. You raise yours back, then crawl down and say nothing to anyone. One morning, you wake to find someone's drawn a smiley face on the latrine wall with the words, "Almost home." You don't know whether to laugh or cry, so you do both. Quietly. The ration line seems lighter now. The cooks hum. A bloke you thought had stopped speaking entirely tells a story about his wife and a goose that hated him. You sit beside him and listen, Even though you've heard it twice before, it sounds better today. Baker pulls out the little notebook where he's been keeping a list of everything he wants to do when the war ends. Get new socks, it starts. Kiss Anna. Buy a pub. Name the pub the Lucky Shot. You laugh. Add your own. Eat a tomato. Sleep past dawn. Dance with someone I don't have to carry. You don't write, remember the dead, but it's already there between the lines. You find yourself daydreaming again. That's dangerous. The mind slips when it thinks it's safe. You picture home, not in flashes like before. Now it's in detail. Furniture smells the way your neighbor always whistles while hanging laundry. You imagine tea in a real cup, a bath, a bed, and then someone down the trench says, "What if it isn't over?" The silence that follows is sharper than any shell. What if it's a trick? What if they're gathering for one last push? What if peace means being transferred to another front, somewhere even worse? What if, just when you allow yourself to believe, it gets ripped away again? Hope here feels dangerous, but it's already too late. It's crept into your posture, into your eyes, into the way your hands move slower when cleaning your rifle, like they want to stop needing it. That night you hear music, faint, from somewhere distant, a harmonica maybe, or a gramophone. It's not a trick, not artillery, music, and you cry, not big ugly sobs, just 2 tears sliding down your face like they finally got permission to leave. You don't wipe them away. The trench is quiet for a long time. Then Baker says, "If it is over, we should throw a party with what someone asks." He grins. Mud pies and rat stew. Someone else says, "I'll bring the lice." You all laugh. It's thin and tired and perfect. You don't know if peace is actually coming. But for the first time, you don't need to. Because for one night under a moon that doesn't feel like a spotlight and stars that look more like promises than threats, you feel something return. Not safety, not certainty, just the possibility of tomorrow. The birds wake you, not shells, not shouting, not the thud of boots or the creak of duckboards, but bird song. Soft, cautious, almost confused, like they're testing the air to make sure it's really safe to sing. You open your eyes, slowly, expecting to see smoke, mist, maybe Baker's elbow halfway across your ribs. But it's clear. Cold, yes. Damp, always. But clear. You sit up. No shelling, no gunfire, no whistles. Just the morning raw and unsteady, trying to remember what it used to be before war filled its lungs. You blink. Look around. Other men are stirring, stretching, rubbing sleep from their eyes with the disbelief of children on the first snow day. No one speaks. The silence isn't heavy. It's soft, like a blanket, like breath. Then someone says it. Is it over? No one answers, because no one wants to be wrong. You stand and peer over the trench wall. No movement, no shots, no figures crawling through no man's land. Just emptiness, still and surreal. Even the barbed wire seems gentler this morning, like it knows its job is done. You feel it before you hear it, the shift. Boots walking upright, voices cautious at first, then louder. Soldiers climbing out of trenches with no rifles in hand. Officers waving, not commanding. Men standing tall, exposed, daring the sky to punish them. And the sky does nothing. Baker climbs up beside you. No helmet, no rifle, just wide eyes and mud-caked boots. You look at each other, then you climb too, out of the trench, onto solid ground. The sun breaks through, not strong, but enough to see each other clearly, enough to feel warmth on your skin that doesn't come from a fire or fever. You hear a laugh, a real one, unburdened. You take a breath. It doesn't taste like smoke. Someone near the rear yells, "Confirmation." It's official armistice. 11 o'clock. Cheers erupt, not loud or wild, but shaky, amazed. Laughter tumbles over sobs. Hands clasp, eyes close. You see a man kiss the ground, and another just sit down and cry, shoulders heaving. And you, what do? You stand still, you listen, and you let the war leave your body. It doesn't go easily. It clings, like lice, like gas, like memory. But it begins to lift. You think about writing a letter, about walking barefoot, about finding a clean shirt. You think about home, about who's still there, about who isn't. You and Baker walk. Nowhere special, just away from the trench. Every step feels like something new growing beneath your feet, something soft, something quiet, something almost forgotten. Peace is not a cheer. It's not a parade. It's this. Walking without ducking, breathing without flinching, looking up and not seeing smoke. You don't know what comes next. A ship, maybe. A hospital. A long train ride. The eyes of someone who's tried to stop waiting for you. But you'll take it, whatever it is. Because this morning, for the first time in years, you heard birdsong before bullets. And that somehow feels like enough. Now the trench is far behind you. You're not cold. You're not wet. You're not awake. You're lying still now in your bed, wherever that may be. And you're safe. You can imagine yourself walking through a quiet field at dusk. The grass brushing your fingertips. The war is over, not just the war of nations, but the one inside your chest. The noise has faded. The boots have stopped. The trench is a memory, dissolving gently at the edges. You take slow breaths. Inhale peace. Exhale fear. Inhale calm. Exhale the weight of everything you carried for too long. You remember the friends you made, the ones who walked with you through the worst days. You remember laughter in the rain, a letter in your coat pocket, the first sip of tea after crawling out of hell. But you don't need to remember everything. Some memories can stay where they are, behind you, beneath the earth, where they've earned their rest. Right now, there's only this stillness. The hum of your fan, maybe. The warmth of a blanket wrapped around you. The slow rhythm of your breath, steady and soft. You're not in the trench anymore. You're not carrying a rifle. You're not waiting for the next whistle. You're here, and it's quiet. Let that quiet wrap around you now. Let your thoughts slow. Let your eyelids get heavier. Let go of the journey. Let go of the noise. You've come home, and you've earned your sleep. Sweet dreams.